Hello, friends. Yesterday I read the preface of Noboru Koyama's book, which I translated uh, about Sato's book collection at Cambridge University Library. And so today I'm just going to crack on with chapter one, which is the next one. So let's find that. Just a moment, please. Yes, I think that's it there. Um, all right. So on, as they say. Chapter 1, Ukiyo-e ruikō. What is the manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō? Ukiyo-e ruikō, various thoughts on Ukiyo-e, is a historical record presenting the results of investigation into the life stories, careers, ancestry, reviews, etc. of Ukiyo-e artists, and is a basic document of Ukiyo-e research. It may be correct to call it a directory of, or a meikan of Ukiyo-e artists. In 1941, Showa 16, Nakada Katsunosuke, 1886 to 1945, published Ukiyo-e ruikō, and in the foreword, he wrote the following about it. Ukiyo-e ruikō is the sole authority for ukiyo-e research, providing many clues for researchers, and is an indispensable reference document. This was Nakada's opinion in 1941, but the importance of Ukiyo-e ruikō for ukiyo-e research has not diminished since then. Until 1889, Meiji 22, when Ukiyo-e ruikō was published as a movable type printed book, Katsuji Honkokubon, it was circulated and used in manuscript form. Before that, it was not published as a printed book. As a result, the number of manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō was very large. Nakada Katsunosuke expressed it thus: there were almost countless manuscripts with no limit. Kitakoji Ken, 1912 to 1991, published a series in 41 parts titled Ukiyo-e ruikō Ronkyu, a thorough discussion of Ukiyo-e ruikō, from 1971, Showa 46, to 1975, Showa 50, in an art periodical titled Hoshun. In the series of essays, there are several reprints of manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō. In an essay published in 1972, Showa 47, Kitakoji Ken writes that he himself had sight of 118 copies of Ukiyo-e ruikō. Nakashima Osamu, 1948 to unknown, who made a comprehensive study of the manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō, confirmed a total of 83 copies. He further estimated that there were probably another 83 or so which he had not been able to confirm. If we take into consideration the many manuscripts seen by these researchers, Kitakoji and Nakashima, the total number of manuscripts may amount to many more than 100. The number of manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō is certainly not small. However, it is not only the number of manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō, but also the complex process of transcription, which means that the lineage of transcribed books is also complicated. This is particularly the case with early transcriptions. Furthermore, in later years, even though new documents were not added, the order of insertion of the original documents was changed. So even if the manuscript has the same title of Ukiyo-e ruikō, there are differences in the main text, and we can say that the content changed over time. It was not the case that the history of the process of transcription of Ukiyo-e ruikō was a mere repeated copying word for word of the main text. A few footnotes there. These transcribed books can be included in the broad category of manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō. However, the content of these transcriptions can vary depending on their lineage, whether extra documents have been added, the method of compilation and editing, etc. In the words of Nakada Katsunosuke, these variations in manuscripts broadened endlessly. Moreover, there are cases where not only the main text but also the titles of the manuscripts are different. In many cases, these manuscripts have tentatively been treated as part of the group of manuscripts titled Ukiyo-e ruikō. But regarding the titles of individual manuscripts, they were not necessarily all titled Ukiyo-e ruikō or of titles of that derivation. For example, Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō or Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō. For this reason, even when the title is different, judging from the content, there are several manuscripts in existence which belong to the broad category of Ukiyo-e ruikō. Ukiyo-e ruikō comes into existence. Including the problem of transcriptions, the process of the establishment of Ukiyo-e ruikō, its changes and evolution, etc., is extremely complicated. The complex situation regarding the establishment of Ukiyo-e ruikō can be tentatively summarized as follows. First, as regards the main text, the satirical tanka poet Ota Nampo, 1749 to 1823, in about 1798 prepared notes called Ukiyo-e ruikō of the names of ukiyo-e artists. It was originally Ota Nampo who gave the work the title Ukiyo-e ruikō. This Ukiyo-e ruikō has come to be referred as the Gen ruikō, original text or Urtext in German. Furthermore, Ota Nampo in about 1800, Kansei 12, copied and added as an appendix to Ukiyo-e ruikō the Kokon Yamato Ukiyo-e Shikei, the ancient and modern lineage of Japanese ukiyo-e, written by Sasaya Kuninori, commonly called Shinshichi, and bound these together as one volume. At this stage, the Kohon Yamato Ukiyo-e Shikei was added to the urtext of Ukiyo-e ruikō. Sasaya Kuninori Shinshichi was the master of a kimono embroidery shop, Nuihakuya, in Honshirogane-cho at Nihonbashi, and he knew a lot about ukiyo-e artists. Sasaya's Kokon Yamato Ukiyo-e Shikei was called Shikei. The popular fiction writer and ukiyo-e artist Santo Kyoden, 1761 to 1816, edited Ukiyo-e ruikō Tsuiko, additional notes on Ukiyo-e ruikō, and published it in 1802, Kyowa 2. Ota Nampo had added Sasaya Kuninori's Shikei to his Gen ruikō and combined them, but in 1818, Bunsei 1, he further added Santo Kyoden's Ukiyo-e ruikō Tsuiko. This is normally referred to as Tsuiko. At this stage, Ota Nampo's Gen ruikō, Sasaya Kuninori's Shikei, and Santo Kyoden's Tsuiko were all bound together in one volume. This is referred to as Sambu or Sambusaku, 3 works. Then in 1821, Bunsei 4, the popular comic writer Shikite Samba, 1776 to 1822, added the Hoki, supplementary notes, to the 3 works of the Sambu. Of course, at this stage, Samba's Hoki was not added to all the manuscripts. There were some which were not enlarged in this way. Nakashima Osamu examined many manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō, and in Ukiyo-e ruikō Seiritsu Hensenshi no Kenkyu, research into the creation and history of changes of Ukiyo-e ruikō, in Ota Kinen Bijutsukan Henshu 2, Ota Memorial Museum of Art, edition 2. Oops, we're missing a U there, museum. Let me put that in, if I can. Yes, well done. Distinguished in the history of Ukiyo-e ruikō between the Seiritsushi, history of creation, and Hensenshi, history of changes. If we follow the distinction made by Nakashima Osamu in his writing, we can regard the Ukiyo-e ruikō as having been created when the Sambu, the 3 works by Ota Nampo, Sasaya Kuninori, and Santo Kyoden, was combined with Shikite Samba's Hoki. There is also the view that the Ukiyo-e ruikō was already created at the point when the Sambu was formed, before the addition of the Hoki. Whichever is the case, we can regard the Ukiyo-e ruikō as being created with the addition of the Hoki to the Sambusaku. Changes in the Ukiyo-e ruikō. For the time being, the Ukiyo-e ruikō was complete, but the additions and supplements to the book continued. The manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō moved to the stage of what is called the Hensenshi, History of Changes, by Nakashima Osamu. In 1833, Tempo 4, the Ukiyo-e artist Keisai Eisen, 1790 to 1848, using the name Mumeo, added Yamato Eshi Ukiyo-e no Ko and Azuma Nishiki-e no Ko to produce Mumeo Zuihitsu, essays by Mumeo. This is usually called the Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō or Eisen Bon, Eisen's book. By the appearance of Eisen's edition of the manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō, Mumeo Zuihitsu or Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō, the manuscript can be said to have entered a new stage. Until then, it had developed, so to speak, by the addition of new documents without any changes to them. The art historian Suzuki Juzo, 1919 to 2010, described this as assembling by additions, Fukashugo Keitai. Eisen, when adding new sections, followed a system of reorganization by dismantling and reshuffling. This is Keisai Eisen, right? In the case of Eisen's Ukiyo-e Ruikō, the main organizing historical document was the above-mentioned Sanbu, but it is said that using this, he produced a completely new and reorganized biography of ukiyo-e artists. So at the stage where Eisen intervened, the method of editing Ukiyo-e Ruikō changed. Regarding this point, Ura Tetsuji, who researched the manuscript of Ukiyo-e Ruikō and published Soko Nihon Ukiyo-e Ruikō, which was centered on Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, wrote in his book as follows. Ukiyo-e Ruikō was at first a list of artists' names and some random notes which occurred to Otanampo, but then it became Hawkeye's book with predetermined articles classified in fixed columns, and its format was edited. The above quotation mentions Hawkeye's book, which is Eisen's book in the collection of Ishizuka Hōkaishi. This was the manuscript which Saito Geshin borrowed when he created Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō and his Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō, Mumeyo Zuihitsu. The evolution of the manuscript of Ukiyo-e Ruikō changed at the Eisen book stage with a change in the method of compilation, and thereafter the changes in the Eisen book became the center of the manuscript's development. As already mentioned, Saito Geshin enlarged the Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō, one of the Eisen books, and created the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. And based on Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, we just had some footnotes there, various books in the same series were produced with titles such as Shinzo Ukiyo-e Ruikō, Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, and Zote Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Eisen's manuscript's lineage partially branched off, but through Saito Geshin's manuscript, it developed further. It is intended to comment later on the stream of books derived from Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Next, I would like to comment on Saito Geshin, who compiled the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, and on the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō itself. I think I'm going to add Keisai. It's Keisai, isn't it? Keisai Eisen. Let's have a quick look again one more time. Up at the top here. The Ukiyo-e artist Keisai Eisen. Okay, so rather than just calling him Eisen the whole time, which this slightly bothers me, I'm going to at least here put Keisai. Keisai Eisen. There we are. Okay, good. Right, next we've got Saito Geshin, 1804 to 1878. Saito Geshin was born in 1804, Bunka 1, in Edo, and died in 1878, Meiji 11, in Tokyo, formerly Edo. He was 74 years old when he died, 75 by Kazoedoshi, which is counting a year in the womb. Geshin gives a strong impression of a man of culture in the late Edo and Bakumatsu periods, and in his last 10 years he absorbed the atmosphere of the Meiji period. Geshin was the name he used in his authored works, but he also used Tekiso and Hakusetsudo. He was usually called Ichizaemon, and his real name was Yukinari. It's a typical man of the Edo era with many names. Very confusing at times. Geshin's house was an old one in Edo for generations, the house of the Kusawake village headman. Geshin, like his grandfather Ukiyo and father Yukitaka before him, was the headman of Kanda Kijicho. He continued in this role after the Meiji Restoration. In 1869, Meiji II, the headman system was abolished, but thereafter Geshin worked until 1876, Meiji IX, as an official of Tokyo-fu, Tokyo Prefecture, as Soe Toshiyori, Kocho, and Toshiyori, and died 2 years later. So Kanda Kijicho is a part of Kanda in what is now Tokyo. So Geshin studied Chinese classics, Kangaku, from Hyokeizan, 1789 to 1859, Japanese literature and culture, Kokugaku, from Ueda Hachizo, and painting from Taniguchi Gesso, 1774 to 1865. After that, while working as a village headman, he was active as a man of letters and historian. He wrote many literary works. Among these, the best known are Edo Meisho Zue, 7 rolls, 20 volumes, Buko Nempyo, main part 8 rolls, sequel 4 rolls, Toto Saijiki, 4 rolls, Seikyoku Rui-san, 5 rolls, 6 volumes, and Hyakugi Jutsuryaku, 10 compilations. Also, there are works like Buko Hengaku-shoo, which is a collection of paintings by Geshin himself. The compilation of Edo Meisho Zue, is illustrated guide of famous places of Edo, was begun by Saito Choshu Ukiyo, the grandfather of Saito Geshin Yukinari. His father, Saito Kansai Yukitaka, continued the work, and it was finally completed by the grandson, Geshin. It was a family undertaking over 3 generations. The illustrations were the responsibility of the late Edo period artist Hasegawa Settan, 1778 to 1843. In Soko Nihon Ukiyo-e Ruikō, Yura Tetsuji writes that Geshin conducted a thorough survey of all the famous places of Edo. As regards the temples and shrines, he checked their history and donations of framed pictures, hogaku, votive pictures, ema, epitaphs, hibun, etc., and wrote about them. Of course, Geshin inherited the accomplishments of his grandfather and father, and learning from his father Kansai's way of doing things, he completed the Edo Meisho Zue. The method of investigation, survey, was not limited to Saito Geshin, but was probably a tradition of the Saito family. There is an illustration from Edo Meisho Zue in the front pages of the book. Buko Nempyo is a topography, regional history, chishi, of the events of Edo edited in chronological order from the time when Tokugawa Ieyasu entered Edo Castle in 1590, Tensho 18, until 1873, Meiji 6. The main part of the book was published in 1850, Kaie 3, and the sequel in 1882, Meiji 15. The sequel was published about 4 years after Saito Geshin's death. In the 1800 Kansai 12 section of the Buko Nempyo, there is an article titled Ukiyo-e ruikō naru. At this point in time, Geshin was probably aware that Ukiyo-e ruikō was more or less complete. It is a useful article for considering how to view Geshin's Ukiyo-e ruikō. 1800 was also the year when Ota Nampo added his Gen ruikō to Sasaya Kuninori's Kokon Yamato Ukiyo-e Shikei to produce 1 volume. In Geshin's very last years, he wrote Hyakugi Jutsu Ryaku, and in that also there is an article related to Ukiyo-e ruikō. In the first part of the book, there is a section titled Ukiyoe, at the very end of which the following is written. Sasaya Kuninori had a kimono embroidery shop in Honshiroganecho in Edo, and he produced Ukiyo-e Ko from Ota Nampo's work, to which was added work by Santo Kyoden, Shikite Samba, and an old man, Nampo, and in the Tempo era, the Ukiyo-e artist Keisai Eisen made further revisions, but both manuscripts were unpublished. By the way, the red squiggly lines indicate, of course, Japanese names for the most part, and it's not surprising that Microsoft Word regards them as a bit suspect, hence the red squiggly lines. The blue ones are connected with English grammar and syntax. What is very interesting in the description of Ukiyo-e ruikō in the Hyakugi Jutsu Ryaku is first that the title is Ukiyo-e Ko. So Geshin seems to have assumed that there were 2 versions of Ukiyo-e ruikō, one by Sasaya Kuninori and another by Keisai Eisen, and neither was published. These points seem to have some connection with the manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō, which Geshin himself possessed. Saito Geshin possessed the manuscripts of both the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō and the Ukiyo-e Ko Ukiyo-e ruikō, but there are unclear points regarding the latter. Ernest Sato acquired both of these Ukiyo-e ruikō manuscripts, and they are now preserved in Cambridge University Library. Regarding the latter, there seem to be complicated questions which will be described later. Returning to Geshin's works, he also compiled the Toto Saijiki, which recorded the annual events of Edo, and the Seikyoku Ruisan, Encyclopedia of Musical Theatre Performances, which investigated the songs used in Joruri tales and puppet plays. Hasegawa Settan and Hasegawa Sette were responsible for the illustrations. This father and son team were important illustrators for Geshin's works, and he maintained a close relationship with them. Saito Geshin also kept a diary which spans 45 years with 36 volumes extant. In Saito Geshin's diary, he is collecting of ukiyo-e in the Bakumatsu and Meiji periods, and after the Meiji Restoration, his enthusiastic purchase and collection of photographs is recorded. With regard to the collection of ukiyo-e, from the Bakumatsu to the early years of Meiji, it is an extremely precious document for our understanding. Also, Geshin's diary is a precious source of information regarding the collection of photographs. From February 1874, Meiji 7, until December 1875, Meiji 8, Geshin collected 615 photographs. He also attracted much interest as a photograph collector in the early Meiji years. Ernest Satow had in his collection almost all of Saito Geshin's books printed from woodblocks, hanpon, beg your pardon, hanpon. In particular, regarding the 20 volumes of Edo Meisho Zue, he bought them at a relatively early stage in the building of his own collection and kept them until 1913, Taisho 2, when he donated them to Cambridge University Library. They were not included in the disposal of Satow's collection, and we may conclude that Satow was particularly attached to them. According to the catalogue of Satow's collection, when he bought the Edo Meisho Zue, the price was 150 momme. Since the unit of currency was the momme, we can guess the period of the purchase. He must have acquired the Edo Meisho Zue before the Shinka Jore, New Currency Act, or immediately after it. The Shinka Jore was established in 1871, Meiji 4. It is not clear how much 150 momme would be in today's currency, but it may be about 500,000 yen. The Edo Meisho Zue was an expensive book. Analyzing the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. Regarding the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō held at Cambridge University Library, in the next chapter it is intended to quote from the description of the catalogue contained in Hayashi Nozomu and Peter Kornitsky Ed's early Japanese books in Cambridge University Library, a catalogue of the Aston, Satow, and von Siebold collections. Here I would like to examine the main text of Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. At the beginning of Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō, Saito Geshin writes the following in the introduction, preface. It allows us to understand the process by which the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō was created and how he went about it. This may be thought to correspond with what Geshin writes in Hyakugi Jutsuryaku about there being two manuscript versions of Ukiyo-e ruikō, one edited by Sasaya Kuninori and the other edited by Keisai Eisen. Ukiyo-e ruikō was compiled by Sasaya Kuninori and Santo Kyoden with notes added by Shikite Samba. The appendix, Kansei 12, 1800, was compiled by Kuninori with notes by Samba. The edition, Kyowa 2, 1802, was compiled by Kyoden with notes by Samba. The above three parts, Sambu, were collected by Ota Shokuzan Sensei at the beginning of Bunsei 1818, and he added notes. The Sambu entered the collection of Suishoshi, which was kept at Ikeishi, and Kataoka Iseishi borrowed it from Ikeishi and copied it. Since Kataoka brought it to me, Saito Geshin, I made a separate book, a copy, in the summer of Tempo 1, 1830, half paper, 30 cho. Cho is the size of the paper. The Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō was written as completed by Mumeyo Keisai Eisen in the winter of Tempo 4. It seems that the Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō was completed by the ukiyo-e artists Keisai Eisen, and that he made the three parts into one, and that he made 2 volumes, adding a missing part. Although the text is unskillful, we can see the labor of compilation at once. We appreciate his sincere intention. Borrowing this book, Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō, from Kamakuraya Hokai in Toshimacho, I have supplemented it and named it Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. However, it is far from complete, so I only wait for additions and cuttings from the people who are interested in this field. Edo Kanda, in the spring of Tempo 15, 1844, Saito Geshin Shiki, Own Writings. I wish to add a commentary on this introduction or preface of Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. First, the introduction of the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō was constructed in 2 parts. The first part was created independently of the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō by Saito Geshin and was based on the manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō which he possessed. In other words, Geshin made a copy from Suishoshi's collection of the manuscript made by Kataoka Iseishi, Kataoka Hiromitsu, in the summer of 1833, Tempo 4, and kept it as his own manuscript. And the first part of the introduction was a description of the manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō. This manuscript of Ukiyo-e ruikō was constructed of 3 parts, the Gen ruikō, Shike, and Suiko, and was in the possession of Suishoshi. The book was borrowed by Hanabusa Ikeishi, who was a painter in the Hanabusa style. Kataoka Issei borrowed Suishoshi's book from Hanabusa Ikkei and made a copy of it. Saito Geshin borrowed that copy from Kataoka Issei and in the summer of 1833 made a copy of it. In the second part of the introduction to Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, the following is explained. First, the ukiyo-e artist Keisai Eisen Mumeo, in the winter of 1833, Tempo 4, compiled the second volumes called Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō. The collector and historical researcher Ishizuka Hokaishi, alias Kamakuraya Jubei or Shukodo, collected and kept it in his collection. Geshin borrowed Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō from Ishizuka Hokaishi, made further additions to it, and in 1844, Koka 1 wrote out the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Nakashima Osamu, who investigated many manuscript copies of Ukiyo-e Ruikō, stated that he was unable to confirm any extant copy of Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō Mumeo Zuihitsu, essays by Mumeo, borrowed by Saito Geshin from Ishizuka Hokaishi. The lineage of manuscripts collected by Keisai Eisen are called Eisen-bon, Eisen books. Nakashima included the following in Eisen-bon: Ukiyo-e ga Ransho, held at Tokyo National Museum; ruikō Zen, held at Tokyo Prefecture Central Library; Mumeo Zuihitsu, held at Tenri Library, a Mura book, etc. These manuscripts have in common that they have biographies of the ukiyo-e artists, they give consideration for space to the artists, and they have illustrated columns, which caused Nakashima to surmise that originally the Eisen books were intended for publication as woodblock prints. In other words, Nakashima imagines that the books in the Eisen lineage were created from the beginning with the intention of publication. Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō was reproduced in 1963, Showa 38, and 1964, Showa 39, in the regular publication periodical Kinsei Bungei Shiryo to Kosho, Documents and Research into Modern Art and Literature. And when the whole content was introduced by Itasaka Gen, he assumed that from the blank spaces left for the insertion of illustrations, etc., it appears that Geshin began to write it with a view to publication. With regard to this, Nakashima wrote, the blank spaces for the insertion of illustrations were not added by Geshin when he expanded the work, but they were already in Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō when he borrowed it from Ishizuka Hokaishi. Regarding the empty spaces in Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, Nakashima and Itasaka expressed differing opinions. Itasaka's introduction will be mentioned later, or mentioned again in the final chapter. Let us return to the introduction of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Why did Geshin, in the first half of his introduction, refer to one more Ukiyo-e Ruikō in his own collection? The origin of Ukiyo-e Ruikō is complicated. Probably in order to show that Ukiyo-e Ruikō was made of 3 parts, he referred to one more Ukiyo-e Ruikō in his library. However, it is likely that for other Ukiyo-e Ruikō manuscripts, for example, the Zoku Ukiyo-e Ruikō, etc., there were similar descriptions. Geshin may have rewritten the description to be appropriate for the manuscripts in his collection. There is one more point of interest in the first half of Saito Geshin's introduction to the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. It concerns the appendices. The Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō consists of 3 volumes, and at the end of the 3rd volume, after the ukiyo-e artists are described, there are the following appendices. Ukiyo-e Ruikō Iwaku, Ukiyo-e Ruikō says, a citation from Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Do Furoku no Kanmatsu, an end part of the Ukiyo-e Ruikō's supplement. Do Tsuiko Batsu, endnotes of Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Ukiyo-e Hinmoku, types or kinds of ukiyo-e. Toto Guji Gaku Ryaki, short accounts of framed pictures of temples and shrines in Edo. Why did Geshin include these in the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō? Apart from the Toto Guji Gaku Ryaki, all of these appendices seem to be related to the Ukiyo-e Ruikō, which was also in Geshin's collection. It is intended to explain this matter later, but the Toto Guji Gaku Ryaki, I've got one too many Ks there. I shall take a K out of that. Whoops. Contains the draft of Buko Hengakushu, collections of Hengaku in Edo. Hengaku is framed pictures or landscape format. Why did he include this draft in the Zoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō? It is very hard to understand. Saito Geshin himself drew Buko Hengakushu, self-drawn book, and after his death it passed into the collection of the collector Sekine Shisei, 1825 to 1893. Thereafter Yasuda Zenjiro II, 1838 to 1921, bought Buko Hengakushu from Sekine Shisei and absorbed it into his collection called Matsuneya Bunko. Then in 1923, Taisho 12, very sadly, Geshin's Buko Hengakushu was lost in the flames of the Great Kanto earthquake, together with the other books in the Matsuneya Bunko. As stated above, the man of letters and historical researcher Saito Geshin borrowed Keisai Eisen's Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō from the book collector and historical researcher Ishizuka Hokaishi, added to it, and in 1844, Koka 1 wrote out the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. But at this point in time, Geshin did not consider the manuscript to be the final one, and he wrote, "This is still not complete, and more like an enthusiast's anthology." From this we know that Geshin, as a customer of the time when requested, loaned the manuscript and allowed it to be copied. From the description in Saito Geshin's introduction, we can note the possibility that transcriptions of Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō were produced. For example, Sekine Shisei in 1868, Keijo 4, Meiji 1, borrowed Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō from Saito Geshin and produced a written copy of Ukiyo-e ruikō. However, he did not simply copy the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō, but abridged one part and added another part. It could not be said to be a mere copy of Geshin's book. Shisei's manuscript was tentatively given the name Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō, but it was also sometimes called Zoku Ukiyo-e ruikō, and even abbreviated to Shisei Zohobon. Regarding Sekine Shisei's written copy of Ukiyo-e ruikō, more will be said later. Moreover, it has already been mentioned in the preface to this book that in 1868, Keijo 4, Meiji 1, Tatsutaya Shukin compiled a manuscript called Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō based on Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. It is not clear what kind of person Tatsutaya Shukin or Tatsuta Shukin was. In the Kokusho Somo Kuroku Hoteiban, General Catalogue of National Books, Expanded and Revised Edition, 1989, there is an entry for Tatsutaya Mahito. In Mukashi Banashi, Shitakiri Suzume, the fable of the tongue-cut sparrow, published in 1865, Keijo 1, is written in the author's part, Tatsutaya Mahito Ho, assisted by Tatsutaya Mahito. It is not clear whether Tatsutaya Shukin and Tatsutaya Mahito were the same person, or if they were not, what the relationship between them was. Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript was published in 1889, Meiji 22, with the title Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō in a transcribed and reprinted edition. The Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō was the first modern publication of Ukiyo-e ruikō in book form. It was published and sold by a bookshop named Isando, so it is sometimes called an Isando book. It is said that this printed book was also sent overseas. The title Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō gives the impression that it was a newly supplemented version of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. Indeed, Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript, the same as Sekine Shisei's manuscript, was not a mere copy of Saito Geshin's manuscript. It included abridgments, additions, and changes. As can be seen from the examples of these manuscripts, there were not many manuscripts which were straightforward copies of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. Nakashima Osamu, who investigated the manuscripts of Ukiyo-e ruikō, commented, "Of all the extant manuscripts of the Geshin books, Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō, which I was able to check, not many were straight copies of the original." Tentatively here, the manuscripts of Sekine Shisei and Tatsutaya Shukin have been included as part of the lineage of manuscripts from Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō. The published book created from Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript will be mentioned later. Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō was mentioned as the original book in many manuscripts and published books of Ukiyo-e ruikō on which they depended. As previously stated, there may have been some manuscripts which were straight copies of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō, but the number was not large. More footnotes there. Also, regarding the title of the published book, Ukiyo-e ruikō, and the Zoho Ukiyo-e ruikō and its variant Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō were used. This historical circumstance gives the impression that from the Meiji period onwards, generally, the original text Honbun of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko had already been thoroughly researched. However, it can be said that until Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko was reproduced and introduced in full in 1963, Showa 38, and 1964, Showa 39, in the regular publication periodical Kinsei Bungei Shiryo Tokosho, the original text was almost unknown by general researchers and readers. After it was reprinted in 1963 and 1964, it at last became accessible to researchers who could make use of it. Again, the publication of Yura Tetsuji's Soko Nihon Ukiyo-e Riko, which was compiled based on Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, contributed to the latter becoming widely known. At any rate, before its reprint and introduction, the existence and title of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko may have been relatively well known, but it seems probable that there were not many experts, in particular ukiyo-e researchers, who actually investigated the written copy manuscript. The only people who clearly did have sight of the manuscript were Ernest Sato and William Anderson. Part of the reason for this may be that after Saito Geshin's death at a relatively early stage, the manuscript passed into the hands of foreigners and went overseas. This circumstance relates to the main theme of this book, namely the provenance of Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. The Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, edited by Tatsutaya Shukin. Next, I would like to explain the situation of the publication of Tatsutaya Shukin's transcribed and reprinted Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. In the introduction of this book, the following is recorded in the name of Tatsutaya Shukin, with suitable punctuation marks added. The printed book, Katsujibon, is a reprint of Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript. In Koka 1, 1884, Saito Geshin, pen name Hakusetsudo, supplemented Zoku Ukiyo-e Riko, which had been compiled by Keisai Eisen, again, and titled it Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. Although Geshin supplemented and corrected and also added notes on upper spaces of pages, there were some omissions and some parts of Geshin's book were in disorder and troublesome. Therefore, I have moved part of the genealogy to the beginning of the book and have supplemented some omissions and have retitled it Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. Tatsutaya Shukin first refers to Saito Geshin enlarging Zoku Ukiyo-e Riko, Mumeo Zuihitsu, and in 1844, Koka 1, producing Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. Then, in the Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, Geshin revises Eisen's Zoku Ukiyo-e Riko, and in the top column of the main text, he makes some additions, and separately notes that there are some omissions. Tatsutaya also states that the content of Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko is confused, and there are parts which are troublesome to read. So he slightly revises the structure of Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, placing the family tree, Keifu, of ukiyo-e artists at the beginning, adding certain omissions, and thus producing a Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. As can be said from the above quotation, Tatsutaya Shukin's Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko was not a mere copy of Saito Geshin's Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko. The above quotation from the introduction to Tatsutaya Shukin's Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko explains its structure, but regarding the title, the situation was different. For the transcribed and reprinted book quoted above, the title was Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, but for the original manuscript prepared by Tatsutaya Shukin, it was Shin-Zo Ukiyo-e Riko. When Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript was published, Ho was added to the title. This change of the title also became the cause of some misunderstanding regarding the manuscripts of Saito Geshin and Tatsutaya Shukin. With the sequence explained above, Tatsutaya Shukin's manuscript was published in 1889, Meiji 22, as the transcribed and preprinted Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko book. This was the first modern publication of a transcription of Ukiyo-e Riko. According to the production notes, Okuzuke of Shin-Zoho Ukiyo-e Riko, the author and publisher was the Yamagata Prefecture samurai Honma Mitsunori. The publisher was Suhara Tetsuji, the printer was Kurata Sennosuke, and the binder and wholesale outlet was Isando. Isando was Suhara Tetsuji's bookshop, so he was responsible for publication, binding, and sales. Honma Mitsunori was stated to be the author and publisher, but in fact Tatsutaya Shukin was the author, so it may be better to describe Honma Mitsunori as editor and publisher. Honma Mitsunori was the eldest son of Honma Kozo, and in 1889, Meiji 22, he opened a dental practice in Tokyo's Koishikawa ward at Suwacho. But 2 years later, he returned to his hometown, Furusato, called Sakata, in Yamagata Prefecture on the coast. Honma Mitsunori was the first person to qualify as a dentist in Yamagata Prefecture by passing the examination. The publication of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō coincided with the time when Honma Mitsunori opened his dental practice in Koishikawa, Tokyo. So, according to the production notes, the two people who were directly connected with the publication of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e ruikō were Honma Mitsunori and Suhara Tetsuji of Isando. But in fact, the person who actively advanced the publication of the book in 1889 was Honma Kozo. It can be stated definitively and beyond doubt that he was the central figure and prime mover. Below I will give the reasons for stating this, but first I will introduce him. Biographical sketch of Honma Kozo, 1842 to 1909. Honma Kozo led a life full of ups and downs from the Bakumatsu 1853 to 1867 until the Meiji period 1868 to 1912. In the Bakumatsu he studied gunnery, and he was an expert in swordsmanship and the shuriken, throwing star, the one that ninjas use. He also experienced travel overseas around the age of 30 in the early Meiji period for 1 year, which had a great influence on him. I want to introduce his very interesting life based on the following sources: Shimpen Shonai Jimmei Jiten, Tamura Kanzo's Sakata Kiki Aruki Zoku, Sakata Kiki Aruki Zoku Zoku, and Sakata Shishi, last volume revised edition. Honma Kozo Tomosaburo was born in Sakata as the second son of Honma Kowa in 1842, Tempo 13. His father was the fifth generation of the wealthy Honma merchant family of Sakata, and the younger brother by blood of the head of the family, Honma Koki. In his youth, Kozo went to Edo and studied Japanese, Chinese, and Western learning, and swordsmanship, and was also known as a master of the shuriken, throwing star. He entered the Nirayama Juku school of Egawa Tarozaemon and studied gunnery from the very famous gunnery instructor Takashima Shuhan, 1798 to 1866. It is said that Kozo became the head of the Egawa Juku. He appears to have been quite tall. In his later years, he is described as having a pure white head of hair, a high forehead, and being tall in stature with a cultivated white beard. There is a very interesting story about Kozo's swordsmanship. In 1870, Meiji III, when he was 29 years of age, he had a fight with 5 samurai of Lord Hachisuka, the end of which was as follows: Kozo killed 2 of them, wounded 2, and the 5th ran away after losing 4 fingers of 1 hand. We may conclude that Kozo was a very skillful swordsman. Thanks to the head of the Honma family, Honma Kobi, 1836 to 1913, who performed the distinguished service of donating war funds to the Shonai domain, in 1864, Genji 1, Honma Kozo was granted samurai status. After serving as the domain's chief representative, Torishi Mariyaku, in Edo in 1868, KO4, he joined the domain's warship, Kisho Maru, as the person responsible for gunnery. Furthermore, when 704 men of the Shonai domain returned home to Sakata from Ezo, Hokkaido, in the steamer of the arms dealer Edward Schnell, 1830 to 1911, Kozo used the war funds provided by the Honma family to conclude a contract with Schnell for the purchase of small arms and ammunition. Regarding the weapons which Kozo bought at that time from Schnell, the Shonai domain samurai received them in Yokohama and sent them back to Sakata. As for the kind of small arms which he purchased, they included 600 Sharps rifles, 300 Minie rifles, 10 Bispols, pistols, 7 bugles, 5 nautical charts of Japan, 5 barrels of gunpowder, etc. It is said that the cost was 34,000 ryo. Kozo, who was head of the Nirayama Juku, used the financial assistance provided by the Honma family to purchase modern weapons from a foreign arms dealer. He showed considerable skill in acquiring these weapons. There was a sequel, Gojitsudan, to the story of Honma Kozo purchasing weapons for the Shonai domain from Schnell. The payment was in fact a little more complicated. This situation became clear in the first year of the Meiji Restoration, 1868, in what was perhaps Japan's first consular trial. Kozo, Tomosaburo, and Schnell concluded a contract for the purchase of weapons on the 10th of September 1868, 24th July of KO4. On the very next day, the army of the new Meiji government landed at Niigata. The Shonai daimyo's minister, based in Edo under the Sankin Kotai system, Ishihara Kuraemon Shigetomo, 1827 to 1868, on his way back from Niigata to the Shonai domain bearing the contract order, met with the army of the new government and was killed. The contract, which was in Ishihara's breast pocket, was immediately sent to the Grand Council of State, Dajokan, in Kyoto. The new government, which had got hold of the contract in October of Meiji 1, 1868, took Schnell to the consular court. In other words, they appealed to the Dutch consul to punish Schnell for selling weapons to the Shonai domain, which was on the enemy side in the Boshin War, 1868 to 1869. Through the consular court, they demanded that Schnell return his 25% deposit, $13,032 in Western money, to the government. This was despite the fact that the Netherlands had been one of the 5 countries signatory to the Ansei Five-Power treaties, and it was required to be neutral in the Boshin War. On that occasion, the government's side produced Honma Tomosaburo's Kozo's tender and purchase order. In the consular court, it was argued successfully by Schnell that the contract for sale or purchase of the weapons had not been created, also that he had not received the deposit, and the Japanese side were unable to prove that the payment had actually been made to Schnell. For these reasons, the Dutch consul rejected the appeal. It was unclear if Honma Kozo's tender was evidence of the payment, and he, Honma, answered that he had entrusted the deposit and the purchase order to the daimyo's minister of the Shonai domain, who had been killed. In the end, Kozo's tender was not sufficient evidence of a contract. In fact, there was a sequel to the case between Schnell and the Japanese government. In 1872, Meiji 5, Schnell sued the Japanese government for damages. He claimed for damages sustained in the Hokuetsu War, the Boshin War in Niigata Prefecture, and for recompense for selling and delivering arms to the Aizu and Yonezawa domains. There were various complications in this case also, but in the end, the new government made an ex gratia payment to Schnell. Regarding the payment and sale of the weapons, some lack of clarity remained. After the Meiji Restoration, Honma Kozo experienced travel overseas. He was about 30 years old and he expanded his knowledge of the world. It was about 1 year after the fight described above. In September 1872, Meiji 5, Kozo left Japan heading for Europe. In the group which he joined were the aristocratic priest Monshu Otani Koe, 1852 to 1923, of Higashi Honganji Temple in Kyoto, Narushima Ryuhoku, and others, a total of 5 connected with Higashi Honganji, Inoue Kowashi, 1844 to 1895, Kawaji Toshiyoshi, 1834 to 1879, Numa Morikazu, 1844 to 1890, and 8 men connected with the Ministry of Justice, Shihosho. In January 1873, Meiji 6, the Iwakura Mission, Iwakura Tomomi, Kido Koin or Takayoshi, Okubo Toshimichi, and others, was in France, inspecting observatories, courts, and jails in Paris and elsewhere. At that time, Honma Kozo was inspecting these facilities together with the main members of the mission. When the Iwakura party stayed in Paris, Kozo and others joined in their activities. In July 1873, Kozo completed his overseas travel and returned to Japan. While he was abroad, it is said that he met a very wealthy American who wanted to adopt him. It is not certain whether they became acquainted in Paris or elsewhere in Europe, or whether Kozo met the millionaire when he was on his way back to Japan via America. Anyway, Honma Kozo had the precious experience of traveling abroad in the early Meiji period. There's some footnotes there. As stated above, when Kozo went to Europe in 1872, Meiji 5, he accompanied Kawaji Toshiyoshi and others. Kawaji was the person who founded the police force. Based on this connection, on the invitation of Kawaji, who was the first chief of police, Superintendent General, Kozo began to work in the police department and did so for 8 years. In 1877, Meiji 10, he was officially appointed as a first-grade officer of the police department, and he left as a 5th-grade superintendent in 1885, Meiji 18. Kozo worked in the foreign section of the headquarters of the police department. This is presumably because he had traveled overseas, and he was well suited to the nature of the work, which required someone who was very good at English and other foreign languages. Kawaji Toshiyoshi went again to Europe in 1879, Meiji 12, to observe the police system. Hayashi Tadamasa, 1853 to 1906, who had in 1878 Meiji 11, been sent to the Paris Exposition, World Fair, as a member of the export company Kiritsu Kosho Gaisha, and had stayed on in Paris after leaving the company, worked as interpreter for Chief of Police Kawaji and Deputy Chief of Police Sawa Tadashi. Kawaji soon returned to Japan because he fell ill, but Hayashi Tadamasa accompanied Sawa Tadashi and others on his inspection tour of Europe's police forces. Later, Hayashi would become an art dealer, but at this time he became acquainted with senior police officers. Honma Kozo's overseas trip had a great impact on his life. Of course, at the beginning of the Meiji period, only a few Japanese were able to travel overseas, but Kozo was one of those lucky few. According to the Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper, Kozo was always nicknamed Yoroppa, Europe. When he worked at the police department, he often brought up the subject of Yoroppa, which is how he earned the nickname from work colleagues. And after he left the police and carried on a money lending business, he had the habit of frequently mentioning Europe. So he was called Kanekashi Yoroppa, money lending Europe. Then when he was elected a Daigishi, member of the Japanese Diet or Parliament, it is said that he was nicknamed Yoroppa Daigishi. In short, he always had the nickname Yoroppa attached to him. He was Mr. Europe. Honma Kozo worked in the foreign section of the headquarters of the police department until 1885, Meiji 18. In 1892, Meiji 25, he became a candidate for the Rikken Kai Shinto Constitutional Reform Party and was elected to the House of Representatives, the lower house. Then from 1894, Meiji 27, Kozo apparently lived in the Koishikawa area of Tokyo and ran a business selling curios and objets d'art, devoting himself to buying and selling hand-painted ukiyo-e, etc. However, it seems that before that, in other words, when he was working at the police department, Kozo was dealing in works of art. Regarding the connection between Honma Kozo and works of art, there is the following statement in Sakata Shishi, the History of Sakata City, revised edition. From the time when he was working for the police department and as a member of the House of Representatives until his old age, Kozo himself dealt in a huge number of high-quality artworks, e.g. of the Kano, early Edo, and Maruyama Shijo, late Edo schools, the Southern School of Chinese painting, Nanga, Western-style paintings by Shiba Kokan, 1747 to 1818, and others, hand-painted pictures by Hokusai, 1760 to 1849, woodblock prints, hanga, and he also became a patron of the maverick painters of the early and mid-Meiji period, such as Kikuchi Yosai, 1788 to 1878, Shibata Zeshin, 1807 to 1891, and Kawanabe Kyosai, 1831 to 1889. As can be seen from the above, Honma Kozo handled a wide range of artworks, and with regard to ukiyo-e, particularly hand-painted pictures by Hokusai, he was a leading collector. Ukiyo-e trading company Gankodo's Takeda Yasujiro reminisces in about 1887, Meiji 20, in the following way about Honma Kozo as a collector of hand-painted ukiyo-e. A rich man called Honma Kozo from Dewa province, now Yamagata and Akita prefectures, so rich that there might be a song not as rich as Mr. Honma, of a branch of the Honma family, loved hand-painted ukiyo-e. When he was young, Kozo went to study in America. With the intention of learning foreign culture thoroughly for his future, it is said that he walked throughout America and France. In America, he noted that Japanese woodblock prints, hanga, and hand-painted ukiyo-e were very popular. This seemed interesting to him, and he remembered that there were such paintings at his home, but when he returned to Japan, he discovered that they had completely vanished. After that, he lived in Tokyo at Sekiguchi Suidocho in Koishikawa, and sometimes he visited his uncle, Yoshida Kinbei of Genrokudo, called Yoshikin, and bought ukiyo-e, all hand-painted. He especially loved Hokusai, part omitted. Hokusai's prints were greatly praised overseas, and Honma Kozo knew this, having heard lectures about Hokusai abroad, so he concentrated on collecting hand-painted ukiyo-e by Hokusai. From Takeda Yasujiro's reminiscences, it is clear how Honma Kozo began to collect ukiyo-e, particularly Hokusai's paintings done in his own hand. In 1892, Meiji 25, Japan's first ukiyo-e exhibition was held in Ueno, Tokyo by the very famous ukiyo-e dealer Kobayashi Bunshichi, 1861 to 1923, and the catalogue for this exhibition included a preface written by Hayashi Tadamasa. It is said that Kozo exhibited 13 works, including hand-painted ukiyo-e by Hokusai, Western-style paintings, etc. It is also said that Kozo had in his collection hand-painted works by Hokusai, which are now held at the Freer Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., including the masterpieces Gyofu Shofu Zu, Fisherman and Woodcutter, Kiseru Motsu Bijinzu, Beautiful Woman Holding a Tobacco Pipe, and Fugaku Fue wo Fuku Doji, Boy Playing Flute with Mount Fuji, etc. These works passed later into the hands of the famous art collector Charles Lang Freer, 1854 to 1919, sold by the likes of Kobayashi Bunshichi. Honma Kozo dealt with ukiyo-e and other artworks, and it seems probable that his opportunity to enter the field of dealing in curios and objets d'art art dealing was greatly dependent on his traveling overseas and working in the police department. Apart from ukiyo-e, he apparently also sold paintings, etc., which were very popular among foreign collectors, in particular works by Kikuchi Yosai, Shibata Zeshin, and Kawanabe Kyosai. This point also suggests connections between Kozo and overseas clients. Above, I wrote that Honma Kozo ran a business selling curios and objets d'art artworks, but from 1894, Meiji 27. But, in fact, he was probably dealing in ukiyo-e and other Japanese art before that time. He had experience of traveling abroad and had contact with foreigners when he worked in the foreign section of headquarters of the police department, so he must have known very early that ukiyo-e and other Japanese art had a very high reputation among foreigners. Furthermore, the police department was the office charged with supervising second-hand stores and curio shops, so this work experience must have been another advantage for Kozo. Second-hand. Then his friendship with the art dealer Hayashi Tadamasa, 1853 to 1906, must have contributed greatly to his own business as an art dealer. In fact, his becoming acquainted with Hayashi may well have been the spur to his entering the art business. However, it is not clear how Honma Kozo and Hayashi Tadamasa first became friends. Honma Kozo worked for the police department for 8 years from 1877, Meiji 10. In the police department, he probably met Suhara Tetsuji of the Isando bookshop. Suhara acted as the bookshop Goyo Shomotsushi, or Goyo Shorin, for the police authority of the Ministry of the Interior and for the police department, and was involved in police-related publications. And furthermore, he was not merely a bookseller, but also dealt in curios and objets d'art. It is likely that Honma Kozo and Suhara Tetsuji became acquainted through the police and art dealing. In this book, we are concentrating on Honma Kozo's involvement with the publication of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. In particular, we are focusing on the connection between Kozo and art. Apart from the art world, Kozo was active in the police department, money lending, and as a member of the Diet. It is also said that as an important person in his hometown, he contributed greatly to the modernization of Sakata City. What a nuisance. The modernization of Sakata City. He established a courthouse and a bank in Sakata and introduced electric light. After he returned from his overseas travels in 1873, Meiji 6, in 1875, Meiji 8, he got into a dispute with his elder brother, Honma Mitsusada, over the succession to the head of the family, Honma Kobi, but this was later settled peacefully. When Honma Kozo returned to his hometown in 1909, Meiji 42, to visit his elder brother who had fallen ill, he, Kozo, died suddenly. He was 67 years old when he died, 68 by Kazoe Doshi, the Buddhist method of counting. Kozo lived through the Bakumatsu, Meiji Restoration, Meiji Ishin, and the Meiji period, and survived the many ups and downs of the time. Who was the real publisher of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō? Whose plan was it to publish the first printed edition of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō? At this point, I want to return to this question. In this book, I have already stated my hypothesis that it was Honma Kozo. Below, I will give the basis for this guess. First, in the appendix Furoku of Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō, the name of the author-cum-publisher is given as Honma Mitsunori, but it is said that Honma Kozo used the name of his eldest son. At the time when Shinzoho Ukiyo-e Ruikō was published, Honma Mitsunori had opened a dental practice in Tokyo. It may be that Honma Kozo had some reason for not using his own name and for using his son's name instead. The same thing applies to the appendix of Shinzo-ho Ukiyo-e Ruikō. Why did Kozo avoid using his own name? This is a mystery. Was it perhaps because he was working at the police department? Shinzo-ho Ukiyo-e Ruikō was published in 1889, Meiji 22, but a similar thing occurred in the following year, 1890, Meiji 23. Once again, Honma Kozo published using the name of his eldest son, this time the title being Kikuchi Yosai Ozufu. I think I'm going to stop here and maybe continue later. Thank you. Stop the share, yeah. And close.